right. Well, my wife Cheryl is sitting in the middle section on the second row. So, but she wanted me to come up and share. It was good to talk with a few of you before the service. I talked with Rose and Butch. Turns out Rose has known Rachel Gallagher, who helped start Open Arms Village for a long, long time. And when she was in college, she went to Oral Roberts University. She was a nursing student. She grew up here in Gresham, Oregon. But when she was a nursing student, she went on a summer internship program to Calcutta, India, to serve with somebody named, in a way, that was kind of the genesis, sending teams every month. And we soon, just as an added incentive, I might add that if you ever want to come and serve on one of our short-term teams in Kenya, the average high temperature in Eldoret, Kenya is 72 degrees year-round. And it rarely changes from that. It's sunny and 72 degrees almost every day in Eldoret, Kenya. So I'm just suggesting, if you want to, when it gets started, when it's broiling and 100 degrees here in Portland sometimes, come to Eldoret, Kenya and cool down. One of our primary missions is to village that we've created out of 52 acres. And I remember Cheryl and I helped build those original homes. We helped start the school for Open Arms Village. So we currently have about 160 children that live at our village and call our village home. And we have about 300 students enrolled in our school. We also have a medical clinic, a church, an outreach center, and 52 acres of farming and agriculture. And I remember one of our original children, his name was Joseph. He came to our village when he was 11 years old. And when he was about 6 years old, he had lost both of his parents to HIV. He was an orphan, and he survived for 5 years on the streets of Eldoret, Kenya, begging during the day and sleeping in a tree at night, because that was the only safe place for him to sleep. And through a set of miraculous circumstances, at the age of 11, he came to our village and found a home in our village, in one of our homes. And I remember a few months after he came, I was speaking an orphan from God because of our sin, but through Jesus, God has adopted us. And that's true. The Bible does say that. But in saying that, I also didn't quite yet understand the deep stigma that most children in Africa face being orphans, especially aged orphans. There's so much superstition and misconceptions and prejudice that surrounds aged orphans in Africa. And I could tell that Joseph and several of the older children at the village were deeply bothered by the fact that I had used that word. So Joseph and one of the other young men at our village came up to me right after the church service. They'd only been living in our village like 5 or 6 months. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but each of our homes is led homes in these homes. So anyway, after the service, he and this other young man came up to me and said, "Matt, why do you keep on calling us orphans? We're not orphans any longer. We have a mom and a dad now. We have brothers and sisters, and we have homes. So please stop calling us orphans." And that simple rebuke taught me two things. One, I realized at that moment, wow, the fact that these two young men had already internalized that and view this as their home now, after only living in our village for 5 months, made me realize this model of caring for these children was actually working. And secondly, we had to start training all of our staff to stop calling our children orphans. So our village legally is called an orphanage in Kenya, but we call it a children's village. And that's how these children view themselves in these homes. And the other thing about Joseph, I might add, he just turned 22 this week. He graduated from high school 2 years ago, but at the age of 11, he had never been to school in his life. He just survived on the streets of Eldoret, and he got enrolled in our school. We quickly found out he was a very, very bright, intelligent young man, and he quickly caught up to his grade level. And he graduated 2 years ago from high school. He took the Kenyan secondary exam, which is their equivalent of an SAT exam, and he graduated in the top 2% of all Kenyans nationwide. He got several full-ride scholarship offers, accepted an offer to study computer software engineering at the University of Nairobi. He's gone a long way from sleeping in a tree at night. We're really proud of Joseph and a number of the other children that have just started graduating from our village. But another thing, just three other quick stories, and then I'll conclude. But one occurred our very first Christmas living in Eldoret. It's kind of a funny story, but we were getting homesick, missing our family and friends, noticing that nobody was putting up Christmas lights or Christmas trees or doing any of the traditions that often many of us celebrate Christmas. They just do it in a very simple way. They gather as a family, have a meal, give their children new clothing as a traditional gift, and go to church, and that's it. Very simple, very elegant, actually. And but we did find out there is one tradition in Eldoret, Kenya, that is honored virtually every year around December 1st in the downtown Nakumatt grocery store, which is kind of their version of a Fred Meyer. They set up a 6-foot-tall robotic Santa Claus, and he has a motion sensor on him, so that when you walk by him and enter the store, he begins to jiggle and shake, and he sings the Yellow Rose of Texas. Now, I've never gotten, the reason why that song. Some of my Kenyan friends probably think that's a Christmas carol, but the ones that are a little bit more savvy, they actually just smile and say, "Karibu Kenya, welcome to Kenya." Because anywhere you go in the world, you're going to find things that don't often make sense cross-culturally. And the two other stories. One occurred shortly after that. We were invited in early 2010 to people. When I arrived, I walked in the room, and I noticed there weren't just people in the room. There were sheep and goats and chickens. And all of this didn't make sense to me till they took up the offering. And that's when I realized, oh, this is the offering. In fact, when I saw the offering plate going around the room, I noticed there was no money in the offering plate. Eggs, vegetables, sheep, chickens, and goats. And this lovely church at the very end of the church service absolutely insisted on giving Cheryl and I a rooster. I have a picture of Cheryl and I holding that rooster if any of you want me to email it to you. But that rooster, well, we were incredibly grateful for the sacrifice they all made in giving us that rooster, but I didn't know what to do with this rooster. We brought him back to our village, presented him to our original house parents, fully expecting he would eat them for dinner, that they as a family would eat him for dinner that night, because we had opened up our first 2 children's homes by then. And they said, no, we won't eat him. They had just built a chicken coop, just bought 24 layer hens, and they said, no, we'll put the rooster in the hen house for now, and we'll figure out something else later. Well, through unintended consequences, this rooster actually wound up becoming the progenitor or founder of our entire poultry project. Because while egg production actually suffered for a period of time, things did begin to multiply. And as a result of that, those unintended consequences, we now actually lay as many as 1,000 eggs a day. We harvest as many as 1,000 chickens a month. It inspired 4 dozen other sustainability projects, most recently a tilapia fish farm using hydroponics technology, and we just added irrigation to our village last year, and now we grow 75% of our own food, which has been huge during this COVID crisis. We also our excess sales from our all of our sustainability projects pays for nearly half of our general operating budget, with the goal of true self-sustainability, and even looking at replicating what we've done here in other parts of Africa. But the best part about that dream and what happened there is it all started with the gift of one rooster from one church in rural Kenya that literally had no money whatsoever, but they gave what they had, and look what God did with that. It's an amazing story. One last story, and it occurred a few years ago. We normally do a couple medical camps every year, And partly because of Rachel Gallagher's leadership as a pediatric nurse, she helps coordinate these medical camps. And I remember a few years ago, we did one in a community near Eldoret, and we set up a medical tent, a pharmacy tent, and a prayer tent, because we pray for everyone before they ever go see the doctor. And I was in the prayer tent with 2 Kenyan pastors looking around in this community, and I noticed, I said, there are a lot of Muslims in this community. Why is that? And they said, well, this is where all of the Somali refugees in our region of Kenya live. I said, how many? They said, well, we think there's about 40,000 of them. I thought, okay. Shortly after that, this gentleman walks in, and I found out later he was an elder from this Somali community. He came up to me and I said, sir, would you like to pray with me? And he said, no, I cannot pray with you. And I think he expected that we would turn him away if he refused to pray. So I said, well, wait a minute. Didn't you come here to see the doctor? And he looked at me kind of curious, so I smiled, pointed at the medical tent, and I said, you know, if you really do want to see the doctor, he's right over there. And at that point, I'll never forget, his whole countenance completely changed. He grabbed my hand, he started kissing my hand and weeping and saying over and over again, thank you. Because for him, this was a really big deal, that we were willing to accept him unconditionally. And when you think about it, that's what Jesus did with every one of us. Romans 5:8 says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Well, this Somali elder went to the doctor, he got treated, got some medicine, and went back home. And that's a beautiful story in itself. But it doesn't end there, because I noticed about an hour or two later, I could hear a lot of talking going on outside of the prayer tent. I looked out the window and noticed I couldn't see the end of the line. Apparently, our Somali elder friend had been telling all of his friends. He had a lot of influence in this community. And by the end of the day, we had registered over 5,000 people in our medical camp. And based on their last names, they had to determine that over half were from the Somali community. But God still wasn't done yet, because before the day was done, this lady wanders into the prayer tent, assisted by someone else from the community. And when I looked at her, I noticed I couldn't see the pupils in her eyes. And I recognized this condition because I've seen it several dozen times in our medical camps. There are no eye surgery clinics in our region of Kenya. And this lady had cataracts in her eyes so thick, she was probably completely blind. And we certainly didn't have an eye surgery clinic at our camp either. So when she came up to me, I asked her, can I pray with you? She nodded her head, we prayed. When we got done, she opened her eyes, and her eyes were perfectly clear. And she began to weep, and I began to hyperventilate, because my mind hadn't quite registered yet. God had done a miracle, but my body reacted. And then when I calmed down a minute later, and I realized what had just happened, at that point it didn't matter anymore. Everyone in the community wanted prayer. It didn't matter who they were. There were some other significant miracles that occurred that day, but the greatest miracle that occurred, because it had never ever happened in this region ever before. The very first Somali family said, I want to be a Christian. And God did a miracle. Well, anyway, if you want to come join us at Open Arms Village, if you want to find out more about what we're doing, please grab a prayer card. Check out our website at openarmsinternational.org. But thank you so much for having us here today. Mungu awabariki. God bless all of you. Amen.
Wow. Well, it's good for us to have visitors who are establishing presence all over the world. These guys are in the continent of Africa. You guys might know that my first trip to Africa was in December. And it was just amazing to be able to be in such a rich culture and among such beautiful people. So thank you guys for what you do. We always want to extend a time for you guys to consider partnering with missionaries that come through. As you might know, nobody pays them to do this. This is not a job that you can get like a steady paycheck from. The only thing that makes this possible is the contributions of the saints of the church. And so before the morning is through, I'm going to invite you to consider wow, can I partner with these people? And if it was just 20, 30, $40, $100, God might put on your heart even more. Uh, in a time like this, I'm sure it would be a real blessing for them to know that they can get back on the field. Missionaries have to raise money, they come back home, they spend time visiting churches and developing relationships. If God will put it on your heart to support what God is doing in this village, not an orphanage, but a village, a family of people who are finding identity not only in human relationships, but with a divine connection with God, with Jesus, His Son. Uh, what an amazing ministry! How long you guys been doing this?
2009.
So for more than 10 years, and it takes a long time, a lot of resources to establish not just a ministry, but a village. And you guys are doing like what kind? Come up here one more time here.
Okay.
So you guys are like establishing water, like wells and electricity. I mean, what kind of infrastructure are you trying to establish in this village?
Well, we have electricity, but we're trying to add solar power to make it more sustainable and energy independent. Um, we have we actually have a river that borders our property, so we pump water out of the river. We put it through a double filtration system, and you can drink it from the tap. I do, and it's good water. And we actually upgraded our water system. We had an engineer from the Portland area that came and upgraded our water system. So now we have so much excess clean water, we give it away to 100 additional families in our community every day. And so we're really grateful for that.
And you guys have like a hospital too there? Like
Yeah, it's not a full scale hospital. It's more, by our standards, it would be more like an urgent care center, but it really serves as a hospital for our village, for our school, for our community around us. There is much larger hospital in Eldoret itself that if they need surgery or major medical procedures, we send them there.
and so you guys like are responsible for all that.
No, we have a whole team. The Gallaghers, we have some volunteers and a couple staff here in the Portland area that help us as well. So it's a huge team effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your ministry is the one that's just running this whole thing. I mean, your team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to always be able to extend. Oh, stay up here for one second. Quick second. Sorry. We want to always extend an opportunity for us to financially support. We obviously want to get to know these people and give them relational support, and then obviously above everything else, we want to give them prayer support. So if you would just extend your hands up towards Matt, Cheryl, would you come up here too? And let's just pray that God would open up the windows of heaven and continue to pour out a blessing on these guys so they can be able to do the work that they have been called to.